This is the funk bass your mom will appreciate.
Isn't it terrific?
Jump around now, jump up and get down. 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 Jump around now, jump up and get down.
Isn't it?
Jump up and get down. Jump around now. 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 Jump up and get down.
All right. So we were back at a 9:30 stream time. We did one video in the morning and I said, screw that. I'm not waking up that early again anymore. I used to be able to do it. I cannot do that anymore. So yeah, we're back at 9:30. I'm not sure. Is that better or worse for you?
I kind of enjoyed the 5:30 a.m. wake up, so that was that's a little more my style.
That's because you wake up like at 3 a.m.
Nah, not anymore. It's normally 5:30 or 6 these days.
I don't know. It was one of those weird things where I can get up that early, but as my day goes on, I feel really tired in the middle of the day if I wake up early versus I could stay up till like 2 a.m., get less sleep, but feel more awake as the day goes on. So I don't get it. You know, I did that whole month of waking up at 4:30 to try to follow Jocko Willink's as kind of an experiment. And that was no problem for me back then when I did it, but I'm not sure. I guess having kids changes that. I guess I wasn't doing as much in my day.
So how was it when they were like waking you up in the middle of the night?
They never really woke me up in the middle of the night too much, to be honest. Like, they did for a little bit, but remember, they started sleeping through the night really quickly. Because I did the whole cry it out method with them pretty early on, too. It was like after like month 3 or 4, you know, they were pretty much sleeping through the night, no problem. You know, Kat hated it because they were crying for, you know, I had to let them cry for almost an hour at a time for that first week. But once they got over that, yeah, they slept through the night. So,
When
you
we
know,
when we've kept them, they go right down when they're supposed to and go right to sleep. So we've never whatever you did worked.
Kat got on me at one point for it because my justification for it was there's the old documents that were from Sparta, which this should tell you again a little bit about me here. Back when, you know, of course, they were at their height, and what they did with their kids at night to make them strong and tough was they did not sleep with their family. They put them in a cold, wet room in darkness at night and never touched them at all throughout the night to make sure they would have no fear and be tough and strong and all that stuff. So then she kind of looked at me and was like, that sounds psychopathic. So I had to check on the kids at least every 15 minutes or so. But
Bit, yeah.
outside of that, they sleep well now. But I don't know. They wake up like at 7:30 and, you know, I don't know. I can go to bed at 2 o'clock, get 5 hours of sleep and feel great. If I get 6, 7 hours of sleep and wake up at like 4 or 5, I feel exhausted by midday. So I don't get it. So that makes us back here at 9:30.
Yeah. I'm at the stage of life I can take a nap pretty much anytime, anywhere. Doesn't matter the time of day.
Is that what I have to look forward to soon?
It apparently runs in the blood because I'm turning into your granddaddy.
Just wait till we start getting there and you start going, hey, look at these vacation pictures from when we went to Alaska.
If you'd have been here at Christmas, you would have seen it was already and streaming in the background on the TV.
Well, I figure we might as well let everyone know. Obviously, unfortunately, there was a massive shooting. Do you remember exactly where the shooting took place?
Yeah, it was at the Kansas City Chiefs Super Bowl parade party. So right there in Kansas City.
Gotcha. Yeah. So shootings taking place there. I'm not sure how many confirmed dead there are yet. It's still kind of everything's still kind of happening. I think it was mostly injured, right?
Yeah, last one I saw, 1 dead, 15 injured.
Okay, so still definitely pretty bad, but
Mostly,
it could be a lot
mostly
worse.
Kids, it sounded like.
Do what?
They're mostly kids, but you know the way the news describes kids these days, they could be 22. I don't know.
That's unfortunately really true. But I mean, obviously,
some of the early signs made it look or sound like it could be gang related or something, which, you know, it's plausible in Kansas City.
Oh yeah, more than plausible there. But I would like to talk more about it. The issue is there's still just tons of information coming out about it. There were some pictures of people who were arrested, but then I saw some people saying they arrested like more than 3 people. They apparently arrested like 20 people or so in the area. So it's hard to say, are those people they're showing in pictures the 3 that are the main suspects, or are those just some of the people we got rounded up afterwards? It's hard to say. I know the pictures right now show it to be mostly Black Americans, males, so it'll probably get buried pretty quickly, which will be interesting to see what they decide, because, you know, it's kind of strange. I remember there was a video from a comedian that talked about, and this was months ago. It was pretending like if they were the government, what their secret plan was, and it was Taylor Swift ending up with Travis Kelce. It's Travis Kelce, right?
Yep.
Okay, yeah, Travis Kelce. Of course, they win the Super Bowl in overtime, and there's going to be a shooting at like one of their big events that will then let Taylor Swift and him come out and do a big push with Biden to do gun control. And this was a comedian months ago making that as kind of a joke, and what do you know? It's it's almost right in line, which is kind of eerie.
The
but
usual suspects that are already using it for the gun control push.
I will say, for all the people saying false flag and all that kind of stuff, if it was a false flag, they wouldn't be using black men to do it, to be honest. Let's be real. They would make sure some guy with a MAGA hat showed up if they were really wanting to push like a false flag, like an actual false flag. So I don't know. Everyone wants to push false flag these days. It's Kansas City. It's Kansas City. There's going to be shootings here.
If we're going to talk false flags, maybe that's the Russian nuke, space nuke.
Oh, we'll get to that for sure, because that is, again, you said this before we went live. They got on Trump for Space Force, but I mean that that right there shows why we could use it. Just saying.
Well, maybe, but it's interesting that all of a sudden there's a space nuke after you pledge a bunch of money that nobody wants to spend to defend against the country that supposedly now all of a sudden has this dreaded space nuke. So,
well, how about this? Let's go ahead and hop right into that story then. Why not? Let's go and hop right into that. Let's make that our first one. I have it pulled up right here anyway. So, the Senate approved $95 billion for Ukraine, Israel, and Taiwan. And so, though I really don't like AP News, they do have a pretty good breakdown of everything that's in the bill pretty well. And really, this is still the Senate just passed it. Congress is saying that they're not going to pass it, so fingers crossed it doesn't go through all the way, but who knows. But right now, spending to Ukraine, $60 billion going to Ukraine. Mind you, $20 billion for a wall under Trump was insane. I mean, who could imagine spending $20 billion at one time like that? $60 billion, though, going to Ukraine, no big deal.
They wouldn't even agree to
do what?
They wouldn't even agree to $4 billion for the wall.
Yes. Now, of course, we'll talk about the border here in a little bit. There's a story about that too coming up. But $14 billion to allow Ukraine to rearm itself through purchasing of new weapons and munitions. So again, just going to Lockheed Martin and all the industrial war complex companies. So just $14 billion being handed through them. $15 billion to support military training and intelligence sharing. $8 billion will go to help their government continue basic operations. Now, they do say there's a prohibition on money going towards pensions, because that was a big issue in the last bill that was tied into the border bill, where they were going to actually pay for people's pensions in Ukraine, which was kind of funny since we can barely afford, anything over here at the point. I mean, let's face it, look at how much debt we have in Social Security when it comes to the national debt as a whole. But they took that out. But there's also $1.6 billion to help the Ukraine's private sector, and obviously that is vague enough to where you have no idea what that could possibly ever mean. So obviously, Mitch McConnell, obviously is a big push with this. I think it was 22 Republicans who voted for this, right? I think in the Senate.
I forget the number.
I think it was 22 Republicans voted for this bill, mind you. So it shows you how terrible the Republicans in the Senate right now are.
Your boy Tillis was on board for it.
Just don't even remind me. I unfortunately helped get that man elected. I hate the fact I helped out, but especially now. Well, I don't know. I'd rather have him there than Democrats, but this isn't much better. This is why we have to make sure. I want him out, at least when the primaries come around next time. But then we have to Israel, about $14 billion to Israel. Now, obviously, it's all based going to defensive measures. $4 billion going to the air defense, with $1.2 billion for the Iron Beam, which is just an awesome name for that, by the way. It's the laser weapon system that intercepts missiles and everything like that. $2.5 billion for military operations in the region, and then $9 billion to humanitarian assistance to provide food, water, shelter, and medical care to civilians in Gaza. So, talk about funding both sides of the war here. I mean, I know they're civilians, and we don't like when civilians are harmed, But can you imagine if while we were in World War II, we just said, "Hey, quick, let's just send food and supplies over to Berlin." Like you wouldn't do that. It makes no sense that we're doing that now. But it's also worth saying, like, well, I think they say it costs well over $100,000 just to shoot down one rocket that Hamas fires into Israel. So Israel can sit there and not have to worry too much about pushing the war too hard because we keep funding their defense system, even though it makes no financial sense for us to be covering the defenses for Israel, because they're firing $50 to $100 rockets and we're spending over $100,000 to take down just one of them. And the only reason Israel can hold back at all when it comes to this war is because we're the ones covering the entire expense for their defense. And no country should be able to sustain that sort of defensive measure to rockets that are just that little in cost. And now, of course, we're using drones, which is even less expensive too. So, there's that as well. And then what do you know? We got around $8 billion going over to places like Taiwan.
Before you get to the next one, what are the odds that any of that money actually gets to the civilians that need it?
Lean forward a bit. I can't hear you.
I said, what are the odds that any of that money?
I think you disconnected your mic. I think you were saying what are the odds it actually gets to any of the civilians, and the chances are absolutely zero, because they sat there and, we paid basically for the pipes and stuff like that in Gaza as is, and what did they do? They took those water pipes and turned them into missiles. So even if we intentionally gave them not the money, but just the resources, they would just turn around and turn that into weapons anyway. So it doesn't really even matter even in that respect. You're still off. Let's see if you can't figure this out. When you think you got working, just speak again, and when I hear you, I'll stop talking myself. Now, again, there is $8 billion also, again, going to the Indo-Pacific to deter aggression by Chinese. I'll be honest, I am not for foreign spending when it comes to sending it to these countries for the most part. But the only one that I think makes any remote sense actually might be Taiwan, considering the fact of every chip that makes all of our phones and all of our computers run, for the most part, are being made in Taiwan. If we lose Taiwan, we do lose one, like, just a massive, massive resource, not just to us on the world scale, but also just as private citizens, right? The prices for everything you buy as electronic will skyrocket if anything ever happens to Taiwan. So you can make some small justification probably for sending over some resources to Taiwan, but Israel and Ukraine, I'm sorry, I still do not like any money going to either of them. I really don't. You still can't hear you. Check that voice meter thing, and that will let you know when it's showing it. Click on, or check the Zoom thing to make sure it's not saying you're muted because your mic went off, or make sure it's still showing it coming out of your mic. So if you pull up your Zoom and hit the arrow on the microphone button, make sure it's checked under your microphone, because sometimes it will auto click off if your mic gets disconnected.
How about now?
I hear it now.
I just got rid of voice meter altogether. Does it sound that different?
A little bit quieter, so you might need to turn up your gain just a little bit. Come on, I don't have tech issues on my side for once, and now here you are.
How about now? Is that better?
Yeah, I think it's good enough.
So let's go back to the civilian thing. So you saw the IDF went in and rescued 2 Israeli hostages.
Yeah.
And did you see where they were being held?
Was it a hospital or something?
They were being held by citizens.
Ah.
So again, where's the money going, and who are we actually helping?
Well, I mean, here's the thing. People have leaked out like their television programs, like their kids programs and stuff. And on their kids program, like, their version of like Sesame Street, it's slowly showing like stereotypical images of Jews and showing them being shot and killed by like other puppets and things. Like, I mean, they literally teach their children from birth, you need to kill the Jews. It's a terrible and awful, awful thing. Obviously, those children aren't to blame, but at the same time, we also have to recognize what you're dealing with there. And that is literally an 8-year-old will pick up a gun and try to kill you if you try to go in there. How do you fight a war like that? I mean, you can't fight a war like that and there not be terrible casualties. I mean, this is why I think for the most part, we're all kind of against war in general if we can help it, because it is absolutely awful. It's not like the movies. You're not going to have like two 20-year-old men, just buff, fighting it out to see who's best. No, you're going to have instances where 8-year-olds are going to pick up guns and try to shoot somebody, and you're going to have mass civilian casualties. It's absolutely awful. But the reality is that's what you have to deal with. There is no other way really around it at the moment. I mean, how much concessions has Israel made to Gaza at this point? I mean, well, for my entire life at least, it's been nonstop.
So the whole thing is, we want a ceasefire, where there was a ceasefire on October 6th.
Yes, who broke it? And they'll go, it wasn't the citizens who broke it. Okay, no, but it's still coming out of Gaza, and the citizens haven't dealt with their own problems. I'm sorry, the people in Israel shouldn't have to deal with the problems that the people of Gaza won't fix. If the people of Gaza really don't like Hamas, then they have to fix that. Or else Israel's going to have to deal with it themselves, because they can't just sit there and let that happen to them. If missiles were coming over from the Mexican side of the border and hitting United States cities left and right almost every single day, you betcha we would demolish them. It wouldn't matter if it was the cartels doing it. We would go in there and solve the issue ourselves, because no country would allow that to happen. But obviously, for some reason, we treat Israel so differently than like every other country. And it's so weird how we end up kind of handling this.
So this spending bill went down in the Senate already, and our senators are ostensibly elected to represent the state from which they hail. So we can argue whether they're truly representing the best interests of their state or not. But what's your argument against, well, Israel is the bastion of democracy and freedom, the only bastion of democracy and freedom in that region. So the money has to go there in order to protect the interest of the United States and those individual states. So what's your argument against that?
My argument against it is the fact that bastion of freedom would have conquered most of the Middle East had we not held them by the leash. My thing is that for the most part, when all these other countries attacked them back like in the, was it 70s or 80s? I think it was like towards the end of the 70s, right? When like Jordan and them all kind of started teaming up trying to take down Israel, and Israel fought them off. It was us who stepped in and said, no, you can't take over all of their lands. That's evil. You can't just take over all of their lands after beating them in a war. And so they took, of course, a big part of it was they took areas similar to the West Bank through defensive war after defensive war. If you sat there and got America out of the equation, and got the UN especially out of the equation, Israel would have taken over most of the Middle East, and probably, they would be a much larger powerhouse than they currently are, which I think would be for the betterment of the Middle East.
But that didn't happen. So now they are the dam holding the water back in that region.
I think if we take away the money that we're sending in to handle their defense grid, they would end up just doing a full invasion into the West Bank, even more so than they're already doing. Demolish everything that's there, push everyone out, take over it, full control, and just adopt it as part of Israel and say to every other country around, if you do the same to us, we will conquer you as well. Because even without our resources, Israel is an absolute powerhouse when it comes to their technology and what they've done militarily. Their tanks are some of the best tanks in the entire world. They have, a very, very powerful Air Force that's very well trained, more well trained than anything in the entirety of the Middle East. I think you take away our resources that we're handing them in the first place. And mind you, I don't think that they shouldn't be allowed to purchase stuff from us. If they want to buy weapons from us, if they want to buy tanks from us, if they want to buy jets from us, Well, that's a fair trade. I don't think there's a problem with that. They're an ally. If they want to buy our resource, buy stuff that we sell, by all means. But just giving them taxpayer dollars when we already are at just massive debt currently seems to be just financially irresponsible for the most part. And I don't think they'll sit there. Again, I really do think there would actually be more peace in the Middle East if we let them just have at it and just wiped our hands of it and said, hey, you're off the leash. Do whatever you need to do to survive in that hellhole of a place. I mean, just do whatever you need to do. And I think they would take control over things a lot more efficiently than how they've currently been. Because again, all these treaties they constantly sign that let Hamas live, that let these terrorist organizations live, is because we tell them to. It's not because they want to do it.
So you got your answer for that one. Let's go to Russia. Last time we talked, Tucker hadn't done his interview, and so maybe you didn't know the entire history from the year zero to till now of Russia. But what I mean, what's your argument there? So the argument from McConnell et al. Is it's our resources that are keeping Russia from taking over all of Eastern Europe.
I mean, I will say this after that interview, I can't believe I'm even saying this. I mean, this is going to sound awful. Nikki Haley might have been somewhat right. She did say that, Putin wants more than Ukraine. He wants, all the Soviet Empire back. And he did say, well, guess what? All of that's technically our territory. So maybe she was a little bit right on what he would like. Now, I still don't think it's really that big of a deal, mostly because, again, you're telling me Germany can't handle any of this. You're telling me the UK can't handle any of this. You're telling me France can't handle any of this. Why are we the ones who have to hold everyone up constantly? It just seems to make no sense to me. And again, here's the thing. I've said this countless times. If we were in a better financial position, I would have no problem with us imposing our will on top of, across all of Earth for the most part. I really wouldn't. I don't think it is morally wrong for us to be the world police. I think it's financially stupid for us to be the world police. I mean, actually, I just typed this in real quick because I always like having this. This is the current national debt. Now, I guess you can't see it over there, but let me just pull this out a little bit. Okay, so $34 trillion for our national debt at the moment. If you have, it's great to give to charity. It's amazing to give to charity. But if your family was in $1 million of debt, you wouldn't be giving to charity constantly. It might be the right thing to do, but you can't afford to do it. So I do not see why we would sit there and constantly keep funding all of these wars after all of these wars when we can't even get ourselves together. It makes no sense for us to tell the world how it should behave when we at this point, and I'm just going to say it, I think we're a failed nation. I don't think we're truly a successful nation anymore. I think at this point we are a failed nation that I hope will one day be able to recover. But you can't look at the national debt of this level, inflation of this level, the sheer impact of stuff like the fact that our dollar is tied to absolutely nothing anymore, and say we are not a failed nation. I mean, half the country hates the other half too. I mean, I think the joke was that if everything that's happening in America was happening in another country, America would invade that country to save them. So I fail to see how we have any role to play in Europe.
It's a bit ironic that we're going to borrow money from China to give to Taiwan.
I know, right?
That's a bit ironic, but so legitimately, where will we determine? And let me go to a couple of things. First off, I think it's funny that you brought up France and Germany as your illustration to defend against an onslaught from Russia. France is going to roll over, and the Germans have already tried it, and we saw that ended up. So you picked two terrible examples, but I guess that's all we have to fall back on. But
hey, you're picking France as we remember them in World War II. There was a time when they were the best of the best.
Hey, that's been a while. That's been a
Why do you
while.
think they're importing so many immigrants? They need someone to throw to the front lines. They're going to use a Soviet strategy.
But at any rate, so you don't see any American interest whatsoever in putting that gate into Eastern Europe.
I see American interest. I just do not see it. I don't see the pros outweighing the cons. I see things getting worse as we constantly interfere with some of these issues, not better. And there was a time when when I think our intervention would actually improve things. But do you really trust the politicians we have today to properly do it in such a way that would be for the betterment of the nation as a whole, or for the betterment of their partners, of course, when it comes to like the military-industrial war complex, as well as just their own pocketbooks themselves? I think a lot of our politicians look at things, for one, not as an America first interest, obviously, but more as a global interest. And I don't think they really care about America in the first place, to a point where whatever decisions they make are not going to be for the betterment of us whatsoever. So, I mean, if we had better leaders, then maybe by all means, I would feel more comfortable about it. But what have they done in Ukraine that would give you any thought to say, oh yeah, they're doing the right thing currently? Because that's kind of my issue. What have we done in Ukraine that's given us any hope that what they're doing is actually going to work in the long haul, and not just a money funneling operation?
Not just Ukraine. What have they done anywhere? They gives us. But what we're looking at is probably the largest money laundering scheme in the history of the earth.
When an entire American dollar at this point is the largest laundering scheme in the history of the earth. I mean, we just keep printing and printing and printing, and then handing out all this money over to foreign countries and saying, hey, look, we're giving you all this money, so you have to use our dollars, which of course keeps propping up our own currency, and eventually that collapses. You can't keep doing that and that succeed. Eventually we will be the Weimar Republic.
Look at how many of those dollars are finding their way back into political action committees, into actual straight up campaign contributions, and especially into the quote unquote charitable organizations that the politicians have on the side. But look at all the money that's funneling back from this right back into their pockets. Now,
I will say this in defense of the people you say, when people say, oh, well, war is the biggest expenditure we have, and war is the reason why we're in such debt. You look right here, it's actually really not the case. When you look at, how much of the debt is from defense and war, $859 billion, which is definitely a lot. Definitely a lot. And it's probably really, honestly, a lot of stuff is probably higher, to be perfectly honest. But just take it for what we got here. Social Security, $1.5 trillion. Medicare and Medicaid, $1.7 trillion. So when people, again, these people always like to say, well, military is our biggest expenditure. No, it's not. Not even by a long shot. It's literally less than half Medicaid and Medicare.
You have grabbed right a hold of the fourth rail. You go.
I mean, here's the thing. Obviously, the solution to the Medicare, Medicaid, as well as Social Security problem is a very, very, very painful one that I do not think Americans are willing to undertake. But as much as I do rail against the fact that we shouldn't be spending this much money towards war, and I really don't think we should be, it is worth saying it is not our biggest expenditure. It is a big one, but not the biggest.
Well,
but I'm not sure if that really counts, just money laundering operations to other countries. So there's that to be said too.
If it was truly being spent for national defense, that's constitutionally required of the federal government. I would be okay with it, but that's not what it's being spent for.
Yeah, well, that's kind of the big issue with a lot of it, right? We would be okay with, we're not anarchist over here. We would be okay with some taxes if we felt it was being used responsibly in a way that would actually benefit the country. The issue is that's just not the case. Not only that, but it's not just a case of us getting, an income tax here or a sales tax there. I mean, the capital gains tax is utterly insane on just the face of it, as well as stuff, of course, like the death tax, where they feel like they can take your money after you've already been taxed on it just because you died. The gift tax, if I want to give you money, that gets taxed too, even though I already pay taxes on that wealth. makes absolutely no sense how we currently run things. But the thing is, it makes it harder than
That's why you
for
give it
people to
that's why you
build.
give it to that's why you give it to the Ukraine first, and then you give it back to me to my foundation.
It's tax exempt, right?
It is. It
But no,
absolutely
the
is.
thing is, they do all this to make sure, of course, you can't build up generational wealth. It keeps the people down while letting them remain up because they can funnel all their money to whatever assets they want, as well as to any nonprofit they want. While obviously, someone wants to pass the family farm down to the kid. Well, now that kid has to pay a crap ton of taxes on the farm, has to continue to pay property tax on the farm that he might not be able to afford. And what do you know? You've completely demolished a family business that now a large company can come in and buy. I almost sound like a Bernie guy over here talking about the evils of large corporations, but the reality is I'm not against large corporations if it's through, an actual free market, but it's not through a free market anymore. These large corporations exist because of terrible government policies that, of course, do nothing but funnel more money to them while destroying all their competition.
So we could do a whole show on taxes and the real amount of Americans that need to pay their fair share. And hint, it's not the 1%, but that's probably not where we're going tonight.
What was it? 1% pays 80 to 90% of all taxes that actually go to the United States government.
It's not, well, the 1% pays about 46%. It was the most.
Oh,
ever
10% pays like 90, right?
or 5,
Nah.
somewhere in the 5 to 10% range.
Which still should say a lot.
50% of Americans pay nothing income tax. Nothing.
Well, because for the most part, even what they do pay, they get back in their tax return at the end of the year half the time anyway. So,
right, so they pay nothing, and then you've been in the business. You pay nothing in, you can sure get a whole lot out because we shifted welfare to the tax system. But that's not what we're here to talk about.
yeah,
We're here
yeah,
to talk
that's true.
about. We're here to talk about this idiotic spending bill that our Republican senators just rolled over and agreed to. And the Republican Party, the Uniparty, is in full. They're in full force this week.
And I did look it up. It is 22 Republicans who voted for this terrible aid package. 22 Republicans.
I still blame you, man. Your boy Tillis.
I feel so bad. I gave full speeches to crowds saying, "Come on, guys, he's the best choice there is."
I voted for him.
Yeah, but I was doing that before he won the primary.
Yeah.
Unfortunately so. Ugh. He needs to be taken out. All of them need to be removed from office. All of them need to be, all 20, anyone who voted for this bill needs to be removed from office, 100%.
The lesson here is you're just not good at picking primary candidates because you were on the wrong side of the most recent one too.
Well, okay, here, I can say this. I'm on the wrong side morally, but every one of them won. At least the ones I've worked with. Everyone I've worked with have won.
I'll give you that.
Yeah, that's part of why I don't think I'm going back in there. I don't think I can keep just, at this point, now that I've realized how quickly they can flip-flop on issues and things, I don't want to sell my soul to just who's going to pay to do things. I'd rather make a video where I can curse them out when they do something bad and then say good things about them when they do good, you know?
I guess that's all right. Do either that or just charge them such a fee that your morality says, I can live with this.
With this money, I can do so much good. It's okay.
That's exactly right.
So
We can
you
rationalize
mentioned,
it.
obviously, the 22 Republicans rolled over and they voted for the bill. Congress looks like they're saying that they're not going to actually, or the House of Representatives, they said they don't plan on voting for it. Let's fingers crossed because who knows? But it is funny, of course, when they say, hey, this bill isn't going to make it past the House of Representatives, you now have reports of Russia wanting nuclear weapons in space. So, yeah, we're back over to this again. It sounds like Space Force might have been actually a pretty good idea from Trump, huh?
Well, assuming this isn't a little bit more sleight of hand from our bureaucracy, but the timing of it makes it questionable at best.
Listen, it's fake for one reason. It's a very clear reason. If they had weapons in space, they wouldn't be using nukes because you don't need nukes if you already have satellites in space that can deliver weapons. There was a thing that they were reporting on. I think it was back in the 90s. They came up with the idea of the rods from God, is what they called them, which was basically these like titanium rods that would be able to be launched from space. And by the time they break through Earth's atmosphere, they're going at such a velocity that when they hit the ground, it would be the equivalent of a nuke going off. So yeah, I think they're tungsten rods is what they were. So far cheaper than what an actual nuke would cost you, and just as accurate. So you wouldn't even use nukes. It would make no sense to use nukes on a satellite to launch from there. You would use something that would be much harder to detect, moving at a much quicker rate, that would cause equal damage, if not in some cases possibly even more. So
When it first broke, I was expecting it to be a laser.
I thought they might have learned from Ronald Reagan.
A laser.
I mean, here's the thing. Whatever they have is far more advanced than what we currently know about, or else, I mean, come on. We wouldn't have stuff like Area 51, right? They have weapons that we don't know about.
And
so
we have weapons that we don't know about.
Exactly. I mean, if you think nukes are the pinnacle of weapons at this point, no. All right, they are ancient weapons at this. Nukes are all, I mean, think of how old nukes are. They're pretty dang old. All right, we had nukes before we went to the moon. Like, let's just be clear about how old nukes actually are. And let's also not forget how much more powerful they've become since Hiroshima and Nagasaki. So the nukes that, I think it was the Tsar bomb, it was the largest one ever detonated, and that one was by Russia. I mean, it made Hiroshima and Nagasaki look like nothing at all by comparison. You know what, I'm actually going to go ahead and pull a comparison just so we can actually have an idea of this, because people do need to realize the fact of our weapons have changed so much since from what we perceive it to be.
Well, that's all well and good, but are we going to believe this report, or do we think it's just one more example of CIA, FBI, other alphabet letter agencies just
the fact here's the thing. I have no doubt that Russia's trying to put weapons in space, because we are probably trying to do the exact same thing. My thing is of course this was leaked out to some extent now because they're trying to push the foreign aid bill over to Ukraine. They are scared, because here's the thing. They know the minute we don't approve even one aid bill to Ukraine, the entire thing falls apart. We won't approve any more going there. That's how this has always gone when it comes to government spending, for the most part. When it comes to a lot of this foreign spending, is it's hard to stop, but once you stop it, it's kind of difficult to get it back rolling afterwards again sometimes. So they are absolutely terrified about if this bill does not make it through. And the thing is, if it doesn't make it through, they probably have something waiting in the back to say, well, the president can shift funds over from this to this and it be allowed. And by the time the Supreme Court gets involved, the money's already gotten to them. So it's more of just wagging your finger saying, don't you do that again. So I'm pretty sure they have contingencies already, but this is, I think, the big reason why, is because they're worried that they won't be able to keep pushing as much money in there if we can stop it just one time. And by the way, here's an idea. This little one here was Little Boy, and this was Fat Man, and this was the Tsar bomb. So, just give you some ideas of how things have changed over the years. And this was 1951, so this is still over 50 years ago.
And much more tactical now, and you know, a lot more capabilities of sneaking something through. But I'm with you. I'm not sure exactly why. So have they actually said, or the news reporting that it really was space nuke, or because when I said that, I was kind of being funny. I really didn't think it was going to be a nuke from space.
They're saying, everything I've been seeing is that Russia wants nuclear weapons in space, which I could see, but at the same time, there's other weapons that have been theorized for a long time now that would do the same thing at a far cheaper cost. Then again, Russia likes being old school with things, so who knows? Maybe they'll throw nukes up there just cause. I mean, look at the tanks they keep sending into battle. Their tanks they keep sending into Ukraine. They're still kind of going by the Soviet philosophy of quantity over quality. So I mean, they got more nukes than anyone else. Why not, I guess, throw some in
Since we're kind of
space?
since we're kind of beating around it, what was your impression of the Tucker interview?
Actually, I enjoyed it quite a bit. I thought it was kind of fast because you know me, I like history, and I did a little bit when it came to Russian history when I was in college because I did my final report on the building and the development of St. Petersburg. And so it was really interesting hearing him go through all of it, and he has a very firm and confident understanding of history. And the difference of watching him do that long of an interview and be able to talk like that just through the entire history of his country and compare that not just to Biden, because that's like comparing a toddler to an Ivy League grad, right? Like it just doesn't make any sense. But compare it to even our top politicians that even we like. That is, it was very well done. I mean, I was very impressed with him. I mean, the guy's bad. I'm not trying, don't need to sugarcoat that. He's a bad guy. But he is an extremely well thought out and intelligent man. I mean, that's what I got from it.
He definitely controlled the narrative. I didn't feel it wasn't what I expected at all. And I didn't expect Tucker to go in and be his normal self. I thought he would, kind of be a little. You got to be a little careful. You don't want to go to the gulag, so you got to be somewhat careful. But I in no way was expecting just long minutes upon minutes upon minutes of historical perspective of the history of Russia. So I mean that just sort of came out of nowhere.
And
But you're right, his ability to carry that narrative and to tell that story over that period of time, that was impressive. I mean, he was trained, he's KGB trained to be able to do a lot of things and
his memory is
communicate.
probably extremely good if he's KGB too.
Right, but it's history. It's his version of history that he's grown up with and loves. We could tell quite a good narrative of our country from the Roanoke Island in the 1500s, right around the corner here to today.
Unfortunately,
I-
now we tell a unfortunate version of our history where we try to sit there and make ourselves feel bad and make ourselves the villain of everything. But if we were
no,
smart, yes, we could tell an absolutely brilliant story of manifest destiny and us conquering an entire continent. I mean, it is a fascinating story when you look at it and does show the excellency of the American people if you actually look at it in the right perspective. But it's funny because
well,
exactly what he
but
does, right?
my-
He looks at a lot of the things that we would say is bad about Russia's history, and he doesn't exactly say it was good at times, but what he does say is it's a part of our history, and he was very much like it should be respected.
right,
And I can appreciate
and
that.
he knew the borders of the country at different parts and times and where he thought they should be now. And
I would have a
again, we
hard
can
time doing that with America, and that's only like 200 years, and he was going back like 600 years.
we can have our arguments over the fact, but the point I was making about him telling that narrative is the ability of him to recall it all. It was really impressive, but not as much as he's getting credit for, because again, we could tell a story that could cover a lot of history on the things that we enjoy about history.
But
And
could
you
any of
you
our
could
politicians do it?
Well, I'm not talking about that. You could carry on a conversation about ancient Rome that would last a very long time because you're interested. So what he did, it was impressive, but I think it got a little bit over the top from some folks, and especially on the right and on the Twitter right that
Well, I'd kind of
kind of
agree with that.
laid it on thick. But
That
it was
should be
it,
the standard. It
was
shouldn't be
totally
the
fascinating.
symbol of excellency.
No, it was totally fascinating. And so on top of this, so now Tucker did the interview. We've got Russian space nukes. We got all this crap going on, and now they release that he's telling the world that they're this close to a cure to cancer.
My whole thing about it is, again, I wouldn't place money on it, but if it turned out to be true, I also wouldn't be entirely shocked either. Like China's been saying the same thing for decades now, that they're right, they're just about to get there. They're just about to get there. So I don't think it's true, but at the same time, when you can just sit there and direct funds however you like, you could probably get a lot of good research done, especially when you don't care about the morals either about how you do it. So I wouldn't be too shocked if they have something new there. I'm not sure if it would be something as easy as a vaccine that just goes, you're no longer going to get cancer, but it's
No, I'm not going to trust that. The latest round of vaccines means you're going to get more cancer.
The tumors have grown. We don't know why. It must be because of environmental factors. It's because global warming's causing it.
It's climate change, baby. That's the whole reason we got turbo cancer is climate change.
Well, no, I think it's him trying to push again the narrative of Russia good, and actually they're a just nation. I mean, again, I think we should definitely respect them to a certain degree, but they're definitely not a good nation. The only reason I don't think we should get too terribly involved in Ukraine is because, frankly, Ukraine's not a good nation either. All right, you have two bad nations at war with one another. I don't know why dealing with one is really that much better than dealing with the other, to be perfectly honest, other than the fact, of course, Russia is trying to get a lot of the world off of the American dollar. So that's, with the whole BRICS alliance, that's a major problem. That's, I think, why we're really at war with Russia. Because if you notice, when Russia started attacking Ukraine under Obama, it was in the news, but no one really cared. It wasn't until they started really bringing people into their trade alliance that we started caring. And so I still think that's more the real reason why.
You got a point, because that is true.
However, here's the thing. If the American dollar crumbles...
Nobody cared about Crimea in 2014.
If the American dollar crumbles, maybe we'll have like an El Salvador moment when we all just switch to Bitcoin. So who knows? Which has done very well for them so far.
I was gonna say it's been quite a run on Bitcoin the last.
Yeah. I wish I had more. I should rephrase that. I wish I had one whole one.
And purchased at a low point, not at a higher point.
Speaking of cryptocurrencies, I still remember I had it was like years ago, I had probably like 200, 300 Litecoin back when I think it was like $10 a coin, and it jumped up to like $25 a coin. I went, I can buy Kat's engagement ring with this, and I bought a really nice engagement ring for her. It was like after all the expenses, close to like $6,000 to $8,000, somewhere around that range. It was an expensive ring. And then what do you know? Now it's worth over like $200 a coin. At one point, I think it got even high. I think it goes up like in the 300s to 400s.
Yeah, but now you got two great kids and.
Yeah, but I'm pretty sure I could have give Kat Kat was literally saying at one point she would have taken her like mom's old wedding ring because they're divorced, or her parents are divorced. So she was like, she would take her mom's old wedding ring and that would be totally acceptable. And I was like, no, I want to get you something nice. Don't worry. So I chose that one.
Well,
but yeah,
can't cry over spilled milk. You can't get emotional over stocks.
No. And here's the thing. The reality is it would have hit like $50 a coin and I would have gone, oh my God, this is so much money. And I would have sold then anyway. Oh man. So I know we kind of were a bit all over the place with that to a certain degree, but I guess around Russia.
We stayed on Russia. And since before we get completely off of Russia, I think we've got further proof now that the alphabets really did get our foreign allies to spy on the Trump campaign.
See, so you feel bad about derailing me from my original first story here.
So there's proof of treason. Well, this is back to Russia. There's proof of treason within our own government.
So this right here, the CIA and foreign intelligence agencies illegally targeted over 26 Trump associates before the 2016 Russia collusion report. Before it all took place. Not only that, it says over here in the article, the United States intelligence community asked foreign spy agencies to surveil 26 associates of Donald Trump in the run-up to the 2016 election, which then triggered the allegations that the former president's campaign had been colluding with Russia, according to the report. The former CIA directive John Brennan identified and presented the targets to the U.S. intelligence sharing partners and the so-called Five Eyes agencies, the intelligence gathering organizations in the U.S., United Kingdom, Canada, Australia, and New Zealand, according to a report published Monday. So, just to make this clear, it is illegal for the United States to spy on a United States citizen without, going through the due process. It's not illegal for them to go over to the UK, over to Canada, Australia, New Zealand, and say, hey, why don't you spy on our citizen and just report back to us? And we've actually done this before in the past. There was a report back in 2018 about how the United States was actually spying on some Australian citizens at one point because they thought they had ties to some like terrorist organizations. So we also actually do this to their citizens as well. Now, that should be completely illegal beyond, I mean, it is completely illegal to do, but it's their loophole they find around it. So they had them spy on Trump for them, already violating, you know, his due process rights. And then them spying on him is what then triggered the Russia collusion hoax, because they then looked at them and said, hey, look, other countries are looking into Trump for, you know, bad reasons. So there must be some credibility to this, even though they were the ones who told them to spy on Trump in the first place. I mean, you want to talk about major, you know, they like to say that, well, there was no, you know, we never had any issues under Obama. You know, Obama never had any controversies. For one, he had plenty. But this has to be, I think, probably the biggest. This is far worse than anything that took place on January 6th. Far worse than anything that took place on January 6th. Are you saying there was
something other than a brown suit? Or a tan suit?
Well, it's funny because I even have it pulled up over here, I think. It was, no, let's not forget, this isn't the first time he's targeted Republicans illegally. The IRS did have to actually settle with conservative groups when they were targeting, when the IRS was actually targeting conservative organizations under Obama as well.
Boy, that sounds like something you would expect KGB Putin to maybe do. Ironic, isn't it?
Well, I mean, let's face it, Obama was, and we've had multiple people who I would call tyrants, but Obama was one. He imprisoned multiple journalists without due process. He killed American citizens in countries that we weren't at war with without following through any due process. And again, I will perfectly admit, those citizens looked like they had ties to ISIS. The issue is, though, those citizens were not in Afghanistan and were not in Iraq and were not in direct communication with them at the time. Instead, we blew them up while they were at a diner in Yemen, a country that we never had authorization to go to war with. So, as far as I'm concerned, it was an assassination of an American citizen by a sitting president, and we just swept it under the rug. We also had him, of course, funneling guns to cartel members across the border with the Fast and Furious scandal. I love how, I think they chose that name on purpose because it would make people laugh. But those guns were then, of course, used to kill American citizens. So, I mean, there's multiple things we could keep going with. Of course, the whole thing in Benghazi as well. I mean, there's so many things we could point to.
Funneling cash to our enemies in Iran.
Selling uranium to both Russia and Iran. I mean,
so keeping this on our Russia theme, I did think it was kind of interesting of Putin pointing out that they wouldn't blow up their own pipeline.
Oh yeah, well, there also was a pretty funny moment in the interview because there was that pipeline that was channeling oil over to I forget where directly it was going. Was it to France or one of them? Germany. So it was the oil coming out of Russia going to Germany. And what do you know? It happened to someone blew it up. And the media reported it was Russia, which makes no sense because that was a huge amount of their income. Why would you, that if anything, would have been a great method for Russia to use as leverage in any sort of discussions because they could simply say, hey, we could turn off that oil. So it makes no sense that Russia would ever blow up the pipeline. Not only that, but there was American ships in the area as well as UK ships in the area. And we know for a fact that Boris Johnson stopped a peace treaty with Ukraine and I think it was Boris Johnson. We know for a fact it was England who stopped a peace treaty between Ukraine and Russia earlier on in the war. So we know they do not want the war to end. And we know their ships were there around the time the pipeline blew up. So the funny part about it, though, was Tucker Carlson, of course, asking Putin about, well, who do you think did it? And Putin goes, well, you. And Tucker Carlson just looks at him and goes, I wasn't there that day. And even Putin, of course, got to go laugh at it and say, no, CIA, your government and all that stuff. Which is the only thing that makes any bit of sense. And anyone who even remotely argues Russia blew up their own source of income is absolutely just full of it. It makes no sense whatsoever.
See, that's some of that 4D chess that they accuse Trump of playing.
Listen, I think Putin is a very smart man. I don't think he would go that far with it, though. I think he would just turn off the oil and say, prepare to have a very cold winter.
Winter is coming.
Yes. Which, remember, did happen shortly after the pipeline blew, where I think it was like Germany having like to ration a lot of their power throughout the winter. Meanwhile, I know for a while there on social media, Russians were posting video of them just turning on all their heat like crazy just to laugh at Germany.
So my question is based on this latest news that we just covered of treason within our own 5 I letter agencies.
Yes.
We know nothing's going to happen because we have a 2-tiered justice system, and it's plainly obvious that there's a 2-tiered justice system. So we know nothing's going to happen. We know that the information that we now see of Biden being too incompetent to stand trial is just a cop out, so that one side has to be on trial for the exact same crime that the other side doesn't have to be on trial for. So what's the point of even having the news come out anymore if absolutely nothing's going to come of it?
And that's always kind of the question, isn't it? Like, what's the point of any of it when no one ever gets held accountable? I think what it really is we're just adding to the camel's back, right? And we're hoping eventually one of these stories breaks the back, right? That eventually people will wake up. They're just something that causes it. And, you know, we look at history for a lot of these things. It's a lot of times kind of smaller things that end up triggering these big events, but it's not because that small thing made that big of an impact. It's just because things got piled on to such a degree, people were just tired of it. I mean, I think that's what we're kind of hoping here in this case, that we can keep piling on and piling on. But then you also have the unfortunate problem where a lot of it, people start just tuning out because there's too much to hear.
Not only tuning it out, but unless you're heavy into certain Twitter circles or listening to us or something like this, you don't know about this.
Yeah,
it gets buried.
Yeah, it gets buried very quick. Well, the good part is
how do you break the camel's back if you can't find the camel, if we're not really getting any straws on the back?
Well, I would say that we are about to break the camel's back because you've seen the mass layoffs right now in these large mainstream media sites. I mean, right now we're in the middle of an election year, and you have places like the Washington Post and stuff like that actually letting people go when now it should be like hiring season for all of them. So they are, I think, breaking at this point. I think we actually are starting to have a massive impact. I think people like Daily Wire, The Blaze, Tim Pool, Louder with Crowder, I think all of them at this point have done so much and got so many people away from the mainstream media. They're actually finally starting to feel that financial burden of their own lies.
You listed everybody but your own.
Well, I know we have a couple videos that have done decently well, so
It doesn't matter. We're the fastest growing conservative podcast on the history of the earth. That's all that matters.
Maybe one day. Maybe one day.
Hey, percentage wise, there ain't nobody growing like we are, baby. We're on top of the world.
However, I will say, when you look at even YouTube, even like small ones like this, there are so many other small podcasts like this, right? Where, you know, people getting on their videos 100, a few hundred, maybe 1,000 views if they're lucky on a lot of their like segments and things like that. All those small creators do add up too. I mean, there is a mass of people fleeing now. I mean, talk to anyone in my demographic and ask, when's the last time you watched Fox, CNN, or MSNBC? And unless they're like at an airport, it's going to be never. So I think actually the airport got rid of CNN too. But
the only time, I mean, I can't say the only time, but the most of the time I see any of those are on clips on X.
Oh, yeah, exactly. And it's also stuff like on YouTube. The only time I ever even hear anything from them is because I just got done watching a video from like Styx X and Hammer or something like that. And what do you know? YouTube then goes, hey, here's what we're going to automatically feed you right after that video. And it's like CNN talking about something I don't care. So it's also YouTube propping up them the best they can, despite the fact, of course, they are failing entirely, which is also why, of course, you had to get rid of stuff like the dislike meter, because you could just see how many people hated whenever that content got fed to them.
Yeah. That is true. You're not getting the answer you don't. If you're not getting the answer you like, and you're getting the answer you don't like, well, obviously you just remove the answer you don't like.
Yeah, but you know, you say what's the point of Eli's articles? I think it's just that. I think it just constantly, even if we demoralize people to a certain, it might demoralize people to a certain degree. One thing it does demoralize people to is their trust in the media overall, which is, I think, the biggest thing. I think Michael Malice has a quote where he says the country would be better off when people look at the people in mainstream media the same way they look at big tobacco CEOs. And I think there's a lot of truth to it in the sense of, you know, back then especially big tobacco, you could say peddling cancer. Well, in a way, I would say mainstream media peddles a different kind of cancer, right? It's the destruction of a country over a slow period of time.
It's not just the destruction of a country; it's the destruction of each individual mind that they poison with the negativity and the lies that are out there. And again, the most devious part is not what they actually say; it's what they don't say and what they don't show. It's the editorializing. That's
Well,
the right word.
I mean, you're right. When it comes to a lot of these stories, if you watch MSNBC or CNN, you never see them. Not once. And even Fox News barely talks about it. There'll be a small segment a lot of times. And maybe certain time blocks you'll get it. But for the most part, they're not going to talk too much on it. They would much rather be talking about stuff that really, and they'll have people on, of course, promoting, again, that foreign aid bill and stuff like that, saying it's a bipartisan bill. Why don't, Republicans in Congress vote on it? You're not going to get the real stuff coming out of them either. And is why I don't consider Fox News a conservative outlet anymore. If anything, they're middle left with some conservative segments. But that's the whole thing. Even the left and right dynamic is totally ruined at this point now, where people like Joe Rogan are considered on the right.
It really is. Well, even Elon, I love him for his stance on free speech, but he was a leftist.
He kind of is a socialist. He definitely leans more socialist on a lot of issues. Now, I will say, I think currently he's the greatest man living. I don't see anyone who has done more for the betterment of mankind of our time period right now than Elon, personally. At least someone who's striving to that degree. Mostly, though, I'm a sci-fi nerd, and maybe I just think of us being on Mars, to be one of the true pinnacle of what we should be, going for. But he is kind of more of a socialist, and they still consider him right-wing. They consider Joe Rogan, who again leans left, right-wing. They consider him like far-right, which is insane. They consider people like Dave Rubin heavily right-wing, and now he's become more right-wing over time, but they were calling him right-wing back when he was still a Democrat.
They've pushed him right for sure. But I mean, anything, the least bit to the right of Lenin is far right.
Exactly. And they'll point to Europe as the example of, they'll use like a global scale of what is middle. But here's the thing, the global scale does lean left because communism and socialism has infested most of the world. It was here that the ideas of individual liberty really took hold. So, of course, over here is a completely different dynamic. And also, let's be real, the ideas of right and left make no sense anymore. Because it used to be, you kind of accepted totalitarianism as a given. And so it was, do you believe in more traditional totalitarianism, or do you want a more revolutionary style of totalitarianism? Do you want the revolutionaries to control your every movement, or do you want the classical kings or whatever controlling your every movement? There wasn't really a good segment for like libertarians or anarchists or any of that kind of stuff for the most part. Because it makes no sense for them to be labeled in the middle because they're not in the middle of those two things whatsoever. The real right and left that should be looked at is left meaning more centralized authority and the right meaning more decentralized authority. Anarchists are far right, they're the far right extremist, and the far left extremists are communist. I think a pretty simple dynamic that would be easy to understand.
What's kind of amazing is watching our vice president loves Venn diagrams, apparently. So if we're doing Venn diagrams, there's a little intersection of the far right and the far left that really comes together on a lot of things. And it's like that, I forgot which comedy team did it, but the one where they showed the leftist and the racist agreeing on everything.
That's a great one. Ryan Long, I think, did that one.
That was hilarious, but it was a lot of truth in it. You got leftists now promoting segregation, and they're just coming together on exactly what we fought really hard to overcome. But the far right and the far left, there's anarchists on both of those sides that are just, for whatever reason, if they ever come together, Lord help us, maybe, I don't know.
It just the examples we give of right and left make absolutely no sense. Like they call, they'll say fascism is a far right ideology, but fascism has more in common with communism than anyone on the right would. It makes no sense. It's all centralized authority at the end of the day, trying to control the lives of the people. So like, how do libertarians and fascists both? How are they both on the far right? It makes no sense.
Let's say that your girl Nikki was to, let's just say everything goes perfectly and she becomes the nominee. The day she becomes the nominee, she's far right.
Oh yeah, exactly.
The day she becomes it, the media attacks her as a MAGA Republican.
But here's why they do it. It moves the Overton window of what is viewed as right versus left. If they can make Nikki Haley, if they made Donald Trump look like he's far right, when he is the most moderate Republican we've had in decades.
Yeah,
he is extremely
my fear in
moderate.
2016. My fear in 2016 was he was too liberal because
exactly. Most people
he was
did.
a New York Democrat for a lot of his life. But Elon, he put a tweet out a long time ago showing that Overton window of how things had changed, and the left kind of leaving him to the right, not him running to the right.
Yeah, and that's what, people like Tim Pool say all the time is that, he didn't really exactly leave the left left him, Now, he has become far more right-winged on some issues, like he's now 100% on the pro 2A side now. He moved to West Virginia and learned some valuable lessons, apparently, because now that dude's posting videos of him shooting 50 cals. So he's pro 2A now.
You get swatted a couple of dozen times, you need a 50 cal.
Be careful how you word that one. Well, the thing is, he talked about the fact like the riots and stuff can really kind of open people's eyes to a lot of this stuff in the sense of, you realize that the police are not there to protect you. They aren't going to protect you, right? If anything, you had that one guy who, there was a Black Lives Matter riot happening outside of his house and they were threatening to burn down his house. He went outside with his shotgun and the police showed up and arrested the guy and did nothing about the crowd who was saying they were going to burn his house down. He didn't even point the gun at anyone. He literally just walked out with the gun. So, which is totally legal to do, mind you. If I want to walk outside and just sit in my front yard with my AR-15, people might call the cops. They might come and ask me some questions, but I'm not breaking any law doing it. Now, you shouldn't do that. I think a lot of those people who do stuff like that are kind of just, poking the bear for no reason whatsoever, and you gain nothing from it. But it was totally legal for the guy to do, and yet he's the one arrested because the mob is out there demanding it so. So the cops won't protect you at all. So the Second Amendment should be obvious to anyone who's been watching any of this stuff take place.
Well, if you want your blood to boil, just kind of look at some of the tweets that are floating around after this most recent shooting. But let me bring this back around because I know we got to come in for a landing here pretty soon. So we talked about mainstream media outlets, great men, and economics. I sent you a text on Sunday morning. C-SPAN on Saturday and Sunday mornings are playing the Free to Choose series that ran on PBS in 1980, 81,
which is amazing.
So there's Milton Friedman, there's Thomas Sowell defending the truth against everybody else that they happen, whoever they happen to bring on. And so anybody that's within sound of my voice, if you can't catch it on C-SPAN, go to the Free to Choose network and you can see great content. You can learn truth and you can can become smart enough not to buy into what the next article you're going to show is with our friends in California.
And well, right now, obviously economic illiteracy is at an all-time high, and something like that will definitely help with that a lot.
Man, it can't hurt. I wish everybody in the sound of my voice would go to the Free to Choose media.
So, speaking of economic illiteracy, let's go and jump saying that's a bit more funny, I think. Most of you guys still have it in the title, and so I do want to at least still touch on it.
But that's what that gave you the segue. This is what I want to talk about. And
Yep.
It would be funny if it wasn't so infuriating.
And there's a lot of people who support this. A California California Senate candidate talk about the idea of a $50 minimum wage in one of their debates. Now, I remember when the fight was for 15.
Well, it's not so much the number that was used, it's the reason behind why she thinks that this is the right number. Barbara Lee, right?
Yep. So right over here. So she said, in the Bay Area, I believe it was the United Way that came out with a report recently that, or very recently, $127,000 for a family of 4 is barely enough to get by. So first off, don't live in the Bay Area, right? I mean, that should be lesson number 1. You know, do whatever you can, just get out of there. That's utterly insane. And this was when she was asked to defend her support of a $50 minimum wage. Another survey very recently, $104,000 for a family of 1 is barely enough to get by. Low income because of the affordability crisis. Just do the math. Of course, we have a national minimum wage that needs to raise that we need to raise to a living wage, Lee continued. We're talking about 2025, fine, but I've got to be focused on what California needs and what the affordability factor is when we start calculating this wage. Now, it is funny, they move down here. They, I believe it was one of the, let's see, one of the lone Republican guy on stage. Everyone wants their employees to make more money, but it's just cost, and someone's got to pay for it, and the restaurant operators don't have enough margin for that, so prices will go up. I wanted to talk about this real quick because this is always our standard, our go-to line a lot of times when we talk about the minimum wage, of how it'll drive up prices. But that's not the only factor here as to why the minimum wage is wrong. And here's the thing, I think we both are on the same stance, right? Minimum wage should be done away with completely, right?
Of course.
Okay, good. So we can always start with that. Minimum wage should be done away completely. Now, the big reason is, or it's, to be honest, there is multiple reasons. But of course, they talk about all the time, well, your Big Mac will go from $5 to $7 or $5 to $10. But the reality is a lot of people don't really care about that too much, I don't think. But I think we jump to that mostly because the majority of people out there, let's face it, are kind of dumb and are completely economically illiterate and can't think to a wider scale than just their individual purchases. But here's the thing, whenever we raise the minimum wage, what we're really doing is giving a massive handout to large large corporations like Amazon, Walmart, Microsoft, whatever, you name a large corporation, that is who's being helped whenever you increase the minimum wage. Because mom and pop shops cannot keep up with that. Sure, Walmart can handle increasing their minimum wage up to maybe $15 or $20 an hour. They just raise the price on some of their better selling items, and most people bite the bullet and do it. And they're selling so many items, they can raise it at a very low level and still probably get by. But a mom and pop shop simply cannot do that. All you do when you increase the minimum wage at this point is destroy every small and medium-sized business while propping up all these large businesses that already are getting tons of handouts from the government as a whole. I'm sure, are you looking up something involving this, or are you private conversation?
No. I'm looking something up.
Okay. But the thing is, like,
we start. I kind of gave you the segue with Milton Friedman, Free to Choose, and I can't remember. Normally, I'm good at this sort of thing, but I can't seem to remember tonight which chapter talks about the minimum wage and its impact on society as a whole. But what statistics will show you throughout history is that every time we've increased the minimum wage, the demographic that gets hurt the worst are young Black males. And
yes,
repeatedly they're getting hammered. And now you throw in millions upon millions of illegals, and what's going to happen to the wage pressure, and it's not operating as it should, because there should be, supply and demand. Labor is a resource like anything else, and supply and demand will set a minimum wage, but the government getting in the way just makes it worse. And the demographic that's hurt most often are young Black males.
So just to let you know, I think it's either Chapter 1, The Power of the Market, or Chapter 8, Who Protects the Worker. So I think that would be the one of the two right there to pull from. But
and the series that is currently on C-SPAN and that you can get on Free to Choose Media, they take the chapters and they show a montage of freedmen in different parts of the world talking about that chapter, and then a discussion at the University of Chicago with generally Thomas Sowell, Friedman, and a bunch of knuckleheads on the left.
So it was funny. Once my son was born, the first thing he told, one of the first things I remember him saying was, "We're gonna have you." He was holding him in his arms. He said, "We're gonna have you reading books like Marcus Aurelius and Thomas Sowell."
I guarantee you, we threw Free to Choose in there because that.
Oh, 100%. And I always throw in Road to Serfdom because that was one of my big awakening books, I would say, too. I really love that one a lot, too. But
You're welcome.
anyone who's economically literate to any degree understands the fact that just because you increase the amount paid does not mean you've increased the value the worker is providing for his services. And so, either way, the value is what the value is, and the cost for each item is going to reflect that. If you're paying them more, obviously the item's going to go up. If you're a small business, you're not going to be able to keep up with that, while large corporations will still be able to, of course, cover those costs through some other means, if not through just bailouts from the government, and continue just going right along. You've basically pulled up the ladder behind you. Anyone who's in favor of bigger minimum wages is in favor of large corporations. So that the left, who likes to say they're for the little guy, they hate the big businesses. No. They're more in favor of big business than anyone else by the policies that they vote for every time.
Every time. And if you think that we're exaggerating and this is crazy, what happened when we shut down for COVID?
Yep. It was a big handout to places like Amazon. Meanwhile, there was cases where
Amazon, who fills their pockets with campaign contributions and contributions to their foundations. Again, it comes right back to money laundering. If you want to know where the real power center of anything is, follow the money.
Yep.
And you're absolutely right. The policies that we're seeing favor big multinational corporations.
And
it's getting harder. The small businessman is getting squeezed at every turn.
And here's the thing. For the most part, natural monopolies aren't that big of a deal, right? Natural monopolies occur when someone can actually provide a service better than anyone else can provide it, and they have actually provided something to the consumers to such a degree that the consumers want it more than anything else there is on the market. And there's no force that causes that. It's simply that they have provided something that's beneficial to all. Natural monopolies are just fine so long as they're not backed by government force. However, when you have laws like this is basically being backed by government force. This is someone putting a gun to a small business's head and saying, you will basically do something to destroy your business or else we will pull this trigger. And it's one of the things of even laws like this are always, enforced at the end of the day through a barrel of a gun.
Now this isn't, before we get too far, this isn't a law. This is just an idiot candidate for Senate.
Yes, but they're already, all the Democrats on stage agreed with $20-something an hour minimum wage. And it's always the Democrats who are still in favor of constantly increasing it.
That's already the law in California. They've already done that.
And here's the thing, just take it to a logical
fast
extreme.
food places. So for the first time ever, because of crime and ridiculous minimum wage policies, In-N-Out's going to close their first ever location, right? So when you combine the two, again, what is it doing to these business owners? How about laws that you think, oh, this wouldn't affect anybody, but how about laws in franchising that are causing in California to treat employees or franchisees as employees of the franchisor? You can't survive that as a franchisor. The reason you establish your franchise is to grow the brand in a way, because you don't have the resources to do it on your own. You can grow faster, farther, and bigger by franchisees investing. But they're screwing with franchise law, and all these things are going on in California. And you're wondering why. How can you afford to pay between state and federal as a business owner? How can you afford to pay your personal taxes that are going to run 60% and higher? Who's going to stay there? How is that going to stay? Elon, he's put his big X symbol over the state of Texas. He's feeling right at home in Texas. Who's next?
Yeah, and I mean, don't get me wrong. To a point, I'm kind of with the feeling of let them suffer because they voted for this, right? They voted for this concept. But here's the thing: why did they vote for this? Well, because for the most part, we put them in. And this might seem a bit off topic in a way, but we put them in these educational facilities that do the furthest thing from that, right? They do not educate children whatsoever, but people have been going through this system and they're never taught any financial literacy whatsoever. They never learn anything about economics, never learn anything about philosophy, never learn anything about critical thinking. And so they go out of this and they have no idea how to properly operate in the real world. And so what do? They have to look to someone higher than themselves to save them. So they start calling Big Daddy government to come in and help them out. And of course, anytime the government gets involved, it gets far worse. But it all stems from the fact of we have done an absolutely piss poor job at educating our youth in this country. And now guess what? That youth has not been educated one bit, are now starting to become the people in charge. And we're really starting to see the consequences of that.
So, the meme that gets me the angriest, I think, on any site is the one, because you see it this time of the year. Oh, I'm really glad I learned parallelograms because it helps me during parallelogram season. And the whole meme is designed to say they should have taught me taxes. No, in a sane world, we would live in a system where taxes, it's 10% or whatever the number is.
Flat
Everybody
tax.
pays. It's simple. We don't live in a world where it's designed. It's absolutely designed to cause and wreak the most havoc.
You voted for Ted Cruz in 2016. Sound like you should have been voting for Rand Paul.
Oh, man, I love Rand Paul. He would be my first choice on just about anything.
But we know he had no chance.
And
the problem with democracy.
say what you will, Cruz is a smart dude. He would still be high on my list of folks I'd like to see.
Listen, he won me over when he was in the Senate, just reading off speeches from Cicero and replacing Caesar with Obama. He won me over at that point. I was like, I'll vote for this man.
He lost me. He kind of lost me when he goes back and kisses the ring of Trump after the whole thing went down. I understand coming back together, but man, that was so personal. I would have had to have gotten my shots in.
It wouldn't have been that big of a deal if he didn't, basically go against Trump by not endorsing him when he was running there, when he said, well, vote your conscience. It just an absolutely terrible phrase.
Well, good for him, because Trump was like, your wife's a dog.
He just don't mention it though. Like, just don't go on stage. I don't know. Just like, that's a terrible thing to do. Like, you don't like the guy, but he's better than Hillary. So, come on. Well, I guess we didn't know back then, admittedly. There was a lot of questions about Trump early in 2016. I'll be perfectly honest. And the fact a lot of Bernie supporters were also supporting him in 2016 definitely had a lot of people going, I'm not sure about this guy. But he definitely was a right-wing populist, not a right-wing constitutionalist. So... and he still is, let's be honest. He did a good job, though. I still am very happy about what he did. But
it's still the reason we are incredibly insane, because DeSantis should be the president of the United States. I'm not getting off of this until 2028 when he wins the nomination and wins the presidency.
If this segment turns to a short, I'm sure you'll get tons of comments saying this old man wanted DeSantis.
You call me whatever you want to call me.
You're an establishment shill.
The only sane choice out of everybody running was Ron DeSantis, and we're too stupid to see it.
No, again, the same choice as Ramaswamy. But guess what? With Trump, we might get a VP Ramaswamy. So
that adds nothing to the ticket.
Dude, here's the thing, though.
It doesn't bring anybody in that's not already there. I don't know who would.
Who could he trust?
I already answered you. I don't know. I don't know who would.
Because that's the thing. I don't know who he could trust that would actually bring new people in. Well, because let's face it, the typical stance would be Nikki Haley because she's his biggest opponent. But you wouldn't want her waiting in the wings to push you down some stairs. That woman has no problem killing people all across the world. You think she has a problem pushing him?
I don't know. I don't think she brings enough that it makes sense to pick her. But I wouldn't feel so terrible like that, because I mean, look at what we've had for vice president for the last 3 years. That's more frightening than anything, because you think the vegetable that's in office right now is bad. What's waiting in the wings is worse.
Oh, come on. I would love to see what would happen in that short time period, just because, I mean, man, it sounds bad, but there is a thing to the whole accelerationist argument in the sense of the worse Democrats do, the easier it is for us to take control.
Well, that's not really true because we're too dumb as a Republican Party to do the right thing and
Well,
pick the
that's
right
true.
people.
That's
We
very
just
true.
lost another seat. You booed out Santos because he's a weirdo, but yet Menendez can take bribes and have gold bars.
Yep.
Swalwell can sleep with Chinese spies. Feinstein can have a Chinese spy in her inner circle for years and years and years and years. Obama can bomb American citizens on foreign soil. You have all these things, and nobody gets on their side. They stick together. They won't pull the trigger and say, you know what, this is beyond the pale. We got to get rid of this one.
So should
But
Republicans
yeah,
just
we
simply
will.
say we will never consider at all holding any Republic? I'm not saying Santos did anything wrong legally speaking because there hasn't been an actual full case against him yet. But let's say he was completely guilty of everything they said he did. Should the Republicans just say we will not hold any Republicans accountable until we see at least some good faith effort by the Democrats to do the same?
I don't see why you got to say anything about it at all. You just hold your ground until it's time to primary him, and you. I mean, they play to win. We play to get along,
Yep.
and that's not working anymore.
Yep. And again, well, it's because we no longer are a united country. We are not the United States.
And common sense has flown completely out the window.
Yeah, no, we are no longer united in any way, shape, or form anymore. There is, I have nothing in common with a liberal in California. And at what point do I have anything in common with them anymore at all? Love for this country? They don't love this country as it should be in a way. They want to, they're pro-abortion. Am I ever going to sit there and break on that issue? Where is there any middle ground whatsoever with a lot of these people for us anymore? And that's a scary thing when you really think about it. Because I can't think of any middle ground anymore with these people. And I'm sure they think the same thing about us. So what do we unite on anymore? How are we ever supposed to come together as a country ever again? Without it resorting in at least, hopefully not violence, but at the very least it's going to resort in some serious problems.
Well, the inevitable anarchy that's headed, you know what it typically leads to. It typically leads to some form of totalitarianism.
Yes.
There's a strong person that's going to come up, and that's unfortunately where we're headed, unless something changes or something breaks.
I mean,
There's going to be a charismatic leader that's going to stand up and unite enough people to become Caesar and look out.
Well, if you look at right-wing Twitter, that'll be the Antichrist appearing sometime soon. So
I don't know. I'm not sure what I believe on that front.
there's a lot of people up there keep saying they seem to be more insistent than ever. We're at the end of times at this point, which I still think is kind of pretentious, to be honest.
But look at populist uprisings through history, and that's really what we're in the midst of now on both.
Oh,
the right and the
100%.
left. There's
And here's the
populist
thing.
on both sides. What results from populist uprisings are Napoleons.
Yes. People don't realize revolution does not normally end up with a country like ours.
No, that was the exception, not the rule for
Yep.
sure. And it was unbelievable. It should never have happened. When we say this country was ordained by God, it was, because it was unheard of. It's not historical. It's impossible.
Just look at
Yet
the
it
French
happened.
Revolution. Look at how that devolved so quickly. And look at every revolution all throughout history. It always ends up in being like what you said. I mean, every single time.
A republic, dear lady, if you can keep it.
We came very close to becoming that. Had Washington said he was okay with being king, we would have had a monarchy in this country, and who knows where things could have gone.
Well, if Hamilton could have gotten a lot of his ways, where would we be?
Very much so. And though I like him, even John Adams said he pushed some of the things he wanted originally in the Constitution as well. Things could have also been a bit different too.
So, some of the claims of him being a monarchist was a little bit of shade being thrown by Jefferson. So I really don't think it went as deep as Jefferson and some of the anonymous press attackers really made it out to be. But that's
his own writings, though, does show he likes centralized authority.
Yeah, the Alien and Sedition Act might turn me the other direction, but A study of Adams, I have a hard time not liking the guy.
I love someone who is just right in between Adams and Jefferson. You know, just I can't get behind Jefferson, but so much because his love for democracy. But Adams also is a little bit of a tyrant at times when it comes to some of his ideas too. So
Man, where are the we've said this over and over again, but where are the Washingtons and the Adams and the Jeffersons and the Madisons, Monroes? Where are the statesmen? Where is that level of intelligence that they could go in and talk philosophy and
so
talk on issues of the day and know how to farm and know how to do things, know how to wage war. They knew all of these things. They were Renaissance men. Where are they? And I'm not one. I'm not claiming to sit here to say it's look at me, I'm the one, because I'm not. What the hell happened to us?
So you said we brought this up multiple times, and I have actually tried to think about it because it's an interesting point. Look at how these people were raised. I mean, really look at their lives when they're younger. So, you have that, you have the Audible book on John Adams, actually, as well as I think you also have one on Jefferson as well, don't you?
So Washington, Adams, Jefferson, Grant,
Okay.
Lincoln,
The only one I've gotten
Napoleon,
through so far is
Churchill.
Adams all the way. So I got through Adams all the way. I haven't got through. I only recently started with Washington. I was going to get Jefferson later. But when you look at a lot of their early life, their families are very much grooming them in a way to success, right? They are very much from the very get-go. You will learn the Bible. You will learn philosophy. You will learn these things. You will learn to be an honorable man. That sort of stuff was pushed very heavily into them at a very young age. And do we have any equivalence to that whatsoever in today's society for children at all? Even the most spectacular of schools we have are still nothing when it comes to that same level of instilling those kind of virtues into people that they had at that time period. And
The only curriculum I've seen that even has any of that is that classical conversation homeschool curriculum that Justin and Ashley are doing with their kids. But that curriculum actually does that.
But the also problem still comes into the fact of the people who they would have to associate to get things done were of the upper epsilon when it comes to intelligence as well. Because back then, obviously, if you had nothing, you couldn't vote, you had no real impact on things. Now we have to appeal to the lowest common denominator on everything. Again, it's the problem with democracy, right? Is you have to go and try to appeal to people who are frankly too dumb to vote. And I will gladly just say it that bluntly because I don't know how you look at some people and say, oh yes, this person has a reasonable opinion on anything for the most part. I mean, you have people out there who couldn't even tell you the year this nation was started. A large amount of people who couldn't tell you that. And yet, they have just as much of an impact as everyone else. While back then, that wasn't the case. They didn't have to concern themselves with that. They didn't have to sit there and lower their intelligence to that level. They could have conversations with people of equal intelligence, if not greater. And they did that, again, from birth. So I do think there does, you point out a lot of times that you are who you hang around with the most, right? Well, guess what? Even if we don't choose to, we are in a society surrounded by idiots. You're telling me it doesn't have some impact that even if I'm not intentionally trying to listen to stuff like Nicki Minaj or any of that crap, when I go outside and have to associate with people, who am I associating with? I'm associating with a lot of people who do listen to that crap. You're not telling me that doesn't have some draining effect on the youth of this country as they're growing up? When they're online and these are the people who they're engaging with, it is impossible right now not to have to sit there and, in a way, lower yourself to just extremely pathetic standards, which in a way is going to sit there and cause you to, I think it's going to cause you to not be as philosophically inclined when it comes to the way you think, because you just can't do it in your everyday life.
So if you're looking at successful marketing copy and regardless of the platform, we're talking successful marketing copy, what grade level do you think it really needs to be written at?
I'm going, just because I know how dumb people are, I'm going to say second grade.
Third. So you're close.
Okay.
Third grade. third grade is generally the target for successful marketing copy. It's ridiculous. But for all of my life and all the different public speaking courses and things I've taken, it's always been you want to make sure you're speaking at like a sixth or seventh grade type
Yeah,
of a level. And so it's always been told to dumb it down. But
and for
man,
good reason.
I just don't know. the the government school systems have failed across the board. They failed. Our institutions of higher learning that used to be special places where you could, even if you weren't specializing in something that really matters, you could go get a classical
Yeah.
education. And I'm all for a liberal arts education. I really think we should be well rounded and learn
Oh,
things
100%. If you actually
other
study the
than
proper things.
right. That should be backed up with something other than ridiculous gender studies or some meaningless, worthless degree. But now the respected higher institutions are no more, and so the all the knowledge of all the history of all the world is at our fingertips anywhere we want it. And we have a society that's unwilling to go out and seek it and self-educate. The men that you were talking about, many times the learning happened at home, and a lot of
Yep.
times it happened on their own. Lincoln taught himself. He had two books in his home. He read them over and over. He had the Bible and a book on etiquette, and that's how he learned to read. That's how he learned the meaning of life, and everything else that he learned was just from the books that he could just scrabble together. Man, we have the capability of doing that. We just have to get more people to say, I'd rather spend my time on this because it matters, and not all of my time with some ridiculous housewives or this or even the sport, whatever sport you're into or anything else. We got to pull away from that stuff and keep our minds in things that matter.
Well, and here's the thing. Here's where I think libertarians are a little bit off at times, where they act like the things that are happening in society really don't matter all that much because it's your individual choices that matter. To a point, I agree with that. However, we are, in a way, what society is around us in many ways, right? I mean, if you were born prior to the ending of slavery, there's a higher likely chance that you'll actually be pro-slavery, right? Because you would have been born and raised in that society. It takes a lot to break away from that sort of stuff. Society does have a massive impact on the development of what you think going forward throughout your life. And whether you want to or not, you can fight it as much as you want, and it will still influence you to a heavy degree. So, libertarians acting
It
like,
defines your belief systems. It defines your belief systems that become part of your subconscious that
yeah,
define the way you're going to respond to problems, challenges, people, and all the things throughout your life. Those things are defined by the time you're 6 or 7 years old based on the environment that you're kept in during that time.
and so the hard part is, again, back then, even when they weren't at home, they were in a society that appreciated, critical thinking. Because let's face it, if you didn't have critical thinking, you probably weren't going to survive, because it does require a good amount of critical thinking to be able to properly farm, right? I mean, people went out like farmers are a bunch of, imbeciles, but man, have you seen a tractor? I mean, back then, obviously, they didn't have that, but even back then, obviously, when you had to sit there and understand how to properly handle a farm, that takes a lot of critical thinking skill. And so they were a part of a society that really appreciated that stuff and encouraged it greatly. And when you went to town, you were surrounded by people who also had at least somewhat similar level of intelligence, because frankly, if you did it, you weren't making it then. So now society around us is, again, it's such a low standard of intelligence. Even if you do raise a kid right, they're going to be influenced by that society as a whole, and it's going to dumb them down to a certain degree. So I'm not sure.
And you asked earlier what's going to ever unite us again with the way we are. It's going to take something bad.
Oh, 100%.
I
I really think we're going to go through a period of tyranny before we ever get back to a period of hopefully freedom. I do not see how it is avoided whatsoever. And it's fine. Actually, I think, I know I point this book quite a bit, but I think the book Starship Troopers actually predicts it quite well, in the sense of, for their society, they got away from our system at first. They went to a system where they were ruled by elites and scientists who, of course, knew everything, but of course, they had no morality to what they were doing, even if they were the smartest men of society, and it caused great chaos, great destruction. They also had cases where before that, gangs took over across all the cities and chaos was around every corner. And so that's why people turned to those, intelligent people to solve all of their problems. And it wasn't until, of course, the totalitarianism that came after that, that eventually that they had to be overthrown. And then through that, they wound up to a society where it had a strong force, but at the same time, a good amount of liberal freedoms in the traditional liberal sense. I think that's kind of a best case scenario.
Then along came Barney Stinson, who had the brilliant mind and the compassion and the EQ that he saved the world by talking to the brain bug.
He didn't save the world by talking to the brain bug. He went in his hand there and went, "It's afraid," and everyone's like, "Yeah, kill more of them." That movie's dumb, but it's great. I love it.
That was so far afield from the book. I mean, it was so weird.
It's someone who read the back of the book and went, "War with alien bugs." Got it. I mean, he directly said that he never read the book. So and the best part is he tried to make it saying, "Well, I want to do a parody of fascism," and everyone treats it like, "Oh, well, they're a fascist society in a movie." How? Because they have a strong military? That's why? Like, there's nothing fascist about their society whatsoever depicted in the movie. And the only thing you can point to maybe is their propaganda films. But we had propaganda films in World War II. Like, that doesn't mean fascism by itself. So the movie fails at what it's even trying to do.
You got propaganda films every time you turn on the TV today. They're promoting the new state religion of LGBTQ plus minus divided by.
Well, that's the thing, is it used to be propaganda films were masculine propaganda. Now it's feminine propaganda, where it's all about the feelings. While back during World War II, it was about be a man and fight the enemies of the country, which I still say is superior propaganda. I miss the old army commercials where it showed some badass in a helicopter about to kill some people. Not, a woman talking about how her two moms are proud of her because she went into the military.
I guess you miss Rosie the Riveter back in World War II. There was some female propaganda back in there too.
There was, but it was telling them to stay home and don't fight in wars.
It wasn't stay home. It was go to the plant and build a plane or two.
Well, I mean, it will stay in the country. Oh man. Well, this has been a good conversation, I think. we need to just sit there and start doing just full segments about some classical info. We need to start just like reading through some classical books and just talking about that, or picking up historical topics.
Well, name the book. I'm all about that.
I've been actually rereading the Epic of Gilgamesh. So I'm not sure if you read that one, but I'm not sure when. I'm only surprised if you have. But I'm not sure when the last time was. But that's always an interesting one. I like that one a lot. Still, it's weird, but the fact it's the oldest story that we know of written, like to me, that's absolutely fascinating. And in fact, it still meets all the beats of current storytelling for the most part too. It shows some things are universal.
I picked up on the Kindle a new to me anyway, translation of Odyssey and Iliad, and I should have done more research before I picked it up. It is so incredibly hard to get through, so I've kind of given up. So I need a different translation again. I was trying to find something that was, I don't know. I was looking for an updated translation that might make it a little more readable, but the one I got was not it.
So I got a very nice version of the Iliad and the Odyssey, and I have read through all of it. I absolutely do love it. However, this is a terrible translation. It is. It reads just like, I'm like sitting reading going, at parts, just because when they start listing off the ships before they go to Troy, I almost have to skip. I have to skip it. I just can't do it. I can't read 3 pages of ship names. I just can't do it.
Yeah, and the one I've got, it's kind of, I don't know how to explain it. It's got some expository information, and then it's got the translation, and they get jumbled for me. And I can read pretty much anything. This one has just got me bewildered. But the biography I'm in the middle of right now is the one on Grant. I think Chernow did that one too. But
okay,
much more interesting study than what I was expecting, because what mostly you're taught about Grant was he was a drunkard that won the war. But he's got an interesting backstory, and so I'm actually quite enjoying it.
Oh, he was a better person than Sherman, that was for sure.
Well, they were buds, but just when you imagine his time at West Point, and he's at West Point with Beauregard and Lee
I was about to say
and
he's literally with the Confederate generals, which is funny.
McClellan and all and the other ones on his side, and all these people were together, and now we're just getting to the point where the 1/3 of the United States generals have decided to stay with their state, because at that time their state was more important than the federal. And many of them didn't agree with slavery, but they did agree with I've got to stay with my state. I've got to stay with my, because they called their state their country.
Yeah, which I
But
mean,
the fact that they lost 1/3 of their key generals, and so every book you read, it's just fascinating that even though the superior weaponry, the superior manufacturing capability, the North had every single advantage except just strategy and pure will
it
of
is
of
amazing the Confederates held on as long as they did. Like especially when we watched that whole thing when we were at Gettysburg and they had like the whole map showing like how the battle took place and everything. I mean, the tactics that the Confederates were able to use nearly won it, and they really shouldn't have. There should have been no reason why the Confederates even came close to winning that.
if not for a miscommunication at the end of day one, they probably would have won it, because they didn't push forward, and it allowed the Union to come back and take the high ground,
Yep.
and it led to the disastrous
What was
charges.
that hill called? Because it was that
Very-
one hill over to the side where it was just constantly switching hands almost on. Like they just barely held.
Yeah,
I can't remember. Was it little? Was it not Little Bighorn? I'm thinking of something else.
no, that's out west. That's where
Yeah, I'm
Custer
about to
got.
say yeah.
But it was a little Big Top or something like that.
Yeah. I think that's right there.
And but yeah, it's so everything in history comes down to just moments. And that moment at Gettysburg was a big one. But another moment was a choice of Lee not to push it, because they could have gone to guerrilla tactics and let the war stay on for much longer than what it did.
But yeah, I mean, but they also and they did the moral thing of saying that that would lead to way too much chaos and way too much death and destruction, and chose submission basically. I think it was Grant who also said that states actually do have the rights to secede, but if you fail, you will pay the consequences for your actions. Like he didn't question the right they had to secede, only the fact of if you do it, you best be ready for war in a way. Like he didn't really question it from a moral stance exactly, just more from a, just realistic stance. So still kind of interesting with that.
Part of his interesting backstory is pretty much everything he did except war, he failed. And it was just one failure after another. But he came from a strong abolitionist family and married into a slaveholding family. And so the backfighting between the one side and the other, trying to determine what he was going to become. There's just a lot of interesting subplots to it. And so I'm enjoying it a lot more than I thought I would. That one and then Undaunted Courage. So I'm also in the middle of the Lewis and Clark expedition. Now that one is really,
That's actually
super
pretty cool.
interesting.
I've not done almost any research on Lewis and Clark. I only know what basically like school taught me of Lewis and Clark. So you have to fill me in as you go through that one.
Yeah, that man, I cannot even imagine what that was like. But my love for sleeping outdoors and having adventures. I would have signed up in a heartbeat.
Well, I got one more, I guess, more philosophical question for you before we end it then. Because you talking about Grant and all this kind of made me think about this. There's a question among a lot of historians. Is history pushed forward by basically groups of people or by individuals? Basically, what is the force that moves history forward?
That's a good, interesting question.
It's one of those ones where it's like, there's not really exactly a right answer. But I still I think I go with the individual over society as a whole. Because I think society is influenced by great individuals, not the other way around. But
So
I can see
think-
both ways.
I think it probably begins individual, but it's carried out by a much larger group and society as a whole.
See,
So you're great. The great actors in history have a big say, obviously, in what's going on, but they generally aren't telling their own story. There's groups of people that are gathering the information and then telling the story in different ways, and obviously, depending on whether you win or lose, depends on how the story is told.
See, I'll say
Um,
this. I think the majority of the great men in history became great by going against their society a lot of times. And that's why I would say normally it's the great men who move history forward more than the society of people who move it forward. Because either A, they go against their own society, or B, they're the ones who rally their society. And then that's
so,
what
so you
pulls it.
mean so you mean who was the catalyst for change? I thought you meant as far as recorded history. No, I totally agree with you there.
Okay, yeah, yeah. Because there's
Yeah,
many people who actually would say that it's the inverse, that the catalyst for change starts at the societal level that influences that individual to then take action. And then without the societal influence, that individual has nothing, which is sort of true. But I think the individual has more influence over society than the society has over that individual.
the big players in history, yes.
And
The average Joe, no.
well,
But the
definitely not the average Joe.
big players of history, you're right. A lot of times they're going against the grain.
And I
They're
would say
doing,
they're dragging society with them, not society pushing the great leader forward.
yeah, a lot of ways I would agree. When you
Okay,
first
that,
asked the question, I thought you were posing it as far as recording of history, not the historical moment in
oh yeah,
that
yeah.
time.
No, the recording of history is done by a was that a Norm Macdonald joke where he's like, "Hey, I was looking at history. I was looking at a history book the other day, and what do you know it? It seems like the good guys just always win. It's fantastic."
Man, don't get me thinking about Norm. I love Norm. I hate that guy's gone.
I know, and to think that according to Michael Knowles, who apparently talked to him quite a bit, is like he's actually a very, very deep thinker in his, or was a very deep thinker in his personal life, and his jokes were a lot more just, even though his jokes were very like dry and plain in a way, but they were still hysterical because they had that dry wit to it.
And wit or no, it was just the way he told the story. Yeah, I mean, you're laughing with him before the punchline is even close to
It was
coming out.
how it is a lesson in how to properly subvert people's expectations. don't
Yep.
don't look at Ryan Johnson's crap when it comes to subverting people's expectations. Look at Norm Macdonald. He subverted expectations all the time. And to think, the first time I ever saw Norm Macdonald was on the Saturday Night Live skit where he's playing Jeopardy with Will Ferrell.
When he was when he was Smokey,
Ted Ferguson or whatever at one or something like that.
Turd Ferguson,
Turd
Burt
Ferguson.
Reynolds. Burt Reynolds is who he was trying to be. Yeah, that was great. He had the
Yeah,
big
and
hat.
I forget who was playing Sean Connery, but Sean Connery also, and that is great too. I'll take Ape Tit for $3 or for 300. That's a petite Deja. Never mind. All right, we've gone for too long. It's 11:30, so interesting
Way past my
conversation. It'll be. I don't know how I'm going to chop this one up, but we'll see.
Well, just do whatever you can so that I'm not always just known as the old establishment guy.
You talk more this time. I think I'll be able to get some out of it. All right, well, anyone who might be watching this after effect, hope you have a great day. We'll be back live Wednesday around